Hello everyone. I know it's been a long time since my last video, but I recently started messing with my software-defined radio stuff again, and wanted to make a new video and just show you kind of what's possible today. If you've got some SDR devices and you're into, scanning trunked radio systems and things like that. What this video is mainly going to focus on is a piece of software called Trunk Recorder. And then we're going to use that to actually monitor the P25 system that we've got here in the area. And then we're going to layer on top of that this piece of software called Rdio Scanner. Both of these are open source. I will put the links to their respective GitHub sites in the description, and we should be good to go there. Alright, so to get started, I'm going to once again be using an Ubuntu VM, and I'm, as usual, working in VMware Workstation. You should be able to use any hypervisor out there, provided that they can pass through USB devices. In my case, I'm going to be using a single RTL SDR device. This is a brand new fresh install of Ubuntu. It's the latest long-term service build. It's 22.04, I believe. That's the latest that's out in the long-term service world, and I recommend that you definitely be running that if you can. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to open up my terminal. And before I get too far, I'm going to add that to my favorites in case we have to open up more later. So you can see, starting out, I'm just logged in as my normal user on here. If I do a print working directory, you can see I'm in just my home directory. So let's get started here. So from the Trunk Recorder website, I can see that they, general information about the project, all that good stuff. This Trunk Recorder will work with trunked P25 and SmartNet systems. You can do conventional P25 and analog systems. That can get a little, I think, hairy, getting things tuned right for squelch and all that stuff. I'm going to be focusing on the trunked P25 stuff. The system I'll be using is kind of a mixed Phase 1, Phase 2 system. So you'll see that come into play, when we actually get it configured and running. You can see the different type of devices that it supports. First and foremost, it supports the nice, fairly inexpensive RTL SDR devices. Originally, when I first started playing with the software package, I had two of the RTL SDR.com devices and so a couple of other much older RTL devices that just, they were not good. They didn't have good thermal cases, that kind of thing. I will say, though, that I have since upgraded to using one AirSpy and one of the RTL SDR devices to cover a little bit of spectrum that my AirSpy does not cover. The AirSpy, it's more pricey than an RTL SDR device, but it gives you 10 megahertz of spectrum to work with, whereas, an RTL SDR device will max out around 2.5 megahertz, give or take, depending on the rates that you choose. So, being able to use a single device and work with 10 megahertz of spectrum, really is awesome. In my previous videos, you've probably seen me use, DSD Plus and OP25. And now, of course, we're moving on to Trunk Recorder. Each one of those kind of has its own way of watching, a trunked system. If you're talking about OP25, it will typically use a single SDR device, and you tune it to the control channel. It watches the control channel. It watches, for voice channel grants and things like that. If, based on your whitelist, blacklist, all that stuff, a talk group gets assigned a voice channel that you're interested in listening to, it will retune that single SDR device to that voice channel. It'll play the audio for you. When the transmission is done, it will retune that RTL SDR device back to the control channel, and, rinse and repeat as more and more calls come in. Where that fails is, while it's tuned to that voice channel, it's not watching what's going on the control channel. So if a more interesting talk group comes up, you miss out on it. That's where your DSD Plus, takes it a little bit further, and, you typically use at least 2 SDR devices when you're using DSD Plus. You have one that's dedicated to the control channel. It will constantly be watching that control channel, and then you have one or more of the RTL SDR devices that can tune into the voice channels to actually, listen to the traffic that you're interested in. And in that case, if a higher priority talk group comes up that you're more interested in than another, it can retune that secondary device immediately, and you can hear the traffic that you're more interested in. Where Trunk Recorder comes in is you give it a slice of spectrum to watch, and anything within that spectrum, so in the case of an RTL SDR device, anything in that give or take 2.5 megahertz of spectrum, it will sit on that chunk of spectrum constantly, and anything within that, be it a control channel or a voice channel, it can monitor all of that at one time. Where that can get a little hairy is if you have a system like I do here that has a ton of frequencies per site. This is a simulcast system that I'm using, or that I'm monitoring, and it has quite a few channels. So I'm using my old favorite, the Texas Wide Area Radio Network. In particular, I'm looking at the Harris County Northwest simulcast site, and you can see how many different channels it can use in just that one system. So, you've got 12 different frequencies here that it can use. Its main control channel is actually this one, and then all of the rest of these pretty much get used as voice channels. So in order to cover that much spectrum, when I first started messing with this, I had to use 4 different RTL SDR devices in order to cover that much spectrum. With the AirSpy, I can cover pretty much all of this, with the exception of just a few of them. And I'll show you too. I don't think this list is actually even completely up to date, because as I was monitoring the channel, I noticed some more come in, and I'll get into this spreadsheet in a little bit, but so you can see I actually have a total of 16 if you don't count the header bar, 16 channels that were being assigned and granted on this system. And the only way that I found out about those extra channels was when I had Trunk Recorder running. I would see channel grants for certain frequencies, and it would show, like, hey, you've got these extra voice channels that you have no devices able to cover that chunk of spectrum. So, like I said, we'll get back into this spreadsheet in just a little bit. So back over to the GitHub for Trunk Recorder. If you scroll down here to the install section, we'll be following the Linux instructions for Ubuntu. So we'll click there, and we can see right here at the top, we've got Ubuntu 22.04, which is the current long-term service build, which I'm using. You can see some extra instructions here if you're using the HackRF, which we are not. So I will just take this full command right here, which what this is going to do is it's going to install a whole bunch of dependencies that we need in order to build this piece of software. You do have to compile this software, but it takes a little bit of time to compile it. I'll probably use some video editing magic to fast forward through that so we're not staring at loading screens, but you can see a whole bunch of stuff in here. The most important ones, build essential stuff. That's how you can actually compile the software. Git, so we can pull the Git repo down when we need to. You can see GNU radios in there. The -dev stuff, those are the libraries. Osmo SDR. Out of the box, one thing to note, this GNU radio, Osmo SDR stuff, this is actually kind of a, think of it kind of as a driver in terms that you can use this driver to interface with a whole bunch of different kind of SDR devices. And I believe out of the box, this does not come with AirSpy support enabled. So that's something that if you want AirSpy support, you will have to download this and compile and install it yourself after making sure that you install the needed libraries and things like that for AirSpy. I'm not going to get into that in this video. I might do a different video that shows how to do that when I've got my second AirSpy in hand and before I actually put it in production. But you can see most of these, all these that have the -dev, all that stuff on them, those are just more libraries so that it can properly build everything. So that being said, let me just again make sure that I've got that copied. I'm going to come back to my VM, log back in since we timed out. Going to right click paste and just hit enter. All right, it's going to ask for my password here because I did a sudo. So sudo is kind of the equivalent of run as administrator if you're familiar with doing that in Windows. So hit enter. Normally when you do an apt install or anything like that, it will ask you, like, are you sure you want to install this stuff? That command that we copied had a flag on it, the -y at the very beginning right there, which means automatically say yes to install all that stuff. So it's gonna run here and install all that. And if this ends up taking a long time, then I'll fast forward through the video. Okay. That did take a little bit of time, but it is now done, finished installing all those dependencies. So we'll go back to here, and we're going to scroll down all the way past all this. We're not using Arch Linux, don't need any of that. And the section we're looking for is right here, Building Trunk Recorder. So I'm going to start with the first line here, and that's to make a folder called trunk-build. And again, just to show you, I'm working out of my home directory for my user. So paste that in. That creates a folder called trunk-build under there. The reason they like to tell you to do this is when you are compiling the software and all that stuff, it will throw all of those files and everything into the folder where you start the process from. So if you were to try to build this from within the actual trunk recorder folder, which we'll get in a minute when we actually download the Git repo, then it can just, it can muck a whole bunch of things up. So this just helps keep that other folder clean so that when you go to update to a newer version and recompile and do things like that, it doesn't get in the way of all that. So we make that build folder for that reason. Okay, so now we're going to use Git, and we're going to copy the source code for trunk recorder down into a folder that's going to be called trunk-recorder when it's all said and done. So downloads that. Downloads pretty quick. Now we're going to change directories into that trunk build folder. Again, just copying and pasting. I could type that out, but I'm being lazy right now. Now we're going to do CMake. CMake is an interesting tool. When you're building the software, it helps to make sure that you've got all the dependencies that you need to actually build the software. If you don't have a certain dependency, it will error out. And it also takes care of optional things. So if you have libraries for certain things that aren't necessarily required to build the software, if it sees that those optional ones are there, it basically sets the flags to say, hey, when this gets compiled, make sure that the support for that stuff that you have those libraries for actually gets added in. And again, where this would actually be useful is if you were trying to add AirSpy support into that GNU Radio Osmo SDR library and driver, is you make sure that you have the AirSpy development libraries installed before, and then you recompile that and install it. But again, that'll be for a different video. All right, so the next thing we do is run that CMake command. So you can see the CMake, if you're unfamiliar with Linux or just command line stuff, those two dots right there mean go back one directory. And then the /trunk-recorder means go back one directory and then look in a folder with that name, which is where we cloned that Git repo into. So when I hit enter, it's going to go through, and very quickly it's going to do all these checks to make sure that it's got everything that it needs to actually compile. So it's looking for certain modules, looking for certain libraries, all that good stuff. It finds all that, and basically it tells the compiler, the software compiler, where to find certain things, what flags to enable, all that good stuff. It does all that hard work for you. So then we're just going to run make, and this will take a while, so I will definitely fast forward through this. But when we hit make, it's going to go through and it's going to actually build all of the needed executables and plugin files, all that stuff that's needed to actually run trunk recorder. It's going to compile those, and then when this is done, we will run one more command using sudo, the run as administrator Linux command, to actually copy all of that stuff into a common directory so that you can call trunk recorder from anywhere and actually run it just like any other installed piece of software. Okay, it's finally done building. Like I said, it will take a little while. We'll come back over here and we'll run the very last command here. And again, what this is going to do is it's going to copy that compiled software that we just make over into the proper directories. All right, so now everything is there. So now we need to move on to the next section, which is configuring the RTL SDR drivers. So to do that, we create, this block list, basically saying don't use the built-in RTL drivers. Use the ones we want. There's a couple different ways to do this. You can follow the instructions on Trunk Recorder here, or there's some specific instructions you can get from this Git repo. They have ones that pertain specifically to, RTL SDR devices, or whatever device you happen to be using, Hack RF, Blade RF, AirSpy, all that stuff. So I like this one because it has quite a few different ones in here. So I'll use this one just to be more thorough. So in order to do that, I need to create that file that I just highlighted and copied. So I'm going to do sudo to do it as admin because it's in a protected directory. I'm going to use nano, which is my favorite quick text editor here. Just paste that in so you can see it's in the etc udev rules.d, just creating an RTL SDR rule. Copy all of this fun stuff. Copy it. Right click and paste it. Now I'm going to hit Control X to exit. It's going to ask, do I want to save it? Y for yes. Where do I want to save it? Well, that file that I told it to in the first place. Just hit enter. So now that is there. If I do a cat and copy and paste that in, you can see it has all that text that I pasted into there. What I like about this Git repo is if you look at these instructions, it says to restart to make this stuff effective. This gives a nice little command here to force a reload. And make sure you copy it all. Don't leave off a letter. And you run that and you don't have to restart. Okay, so now we should be ready for it to actually read and recognize our RTL SDR device. So I'm going to come up here and go to VM, Removal Devices, find my RTL SDR device, and tell it to go ahead and connect it into the VM here. So that's just like plugging it into a USB port. If I do a sudo d message, I can see that when I plugged it in, it got assigned software radio, blah, 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 registered new driver, all that good stuff. So one thing that I would like to do is I want to make sure that the RTL device is working properly. So a way I can do that is to install the RTL SDR tools. So I'm going to do a sudo apt install RTL-SDR. And it's going to install all the fun little RTL SDR tools. So if I type RTL and hit tab, you can see a list of the different tools that just installed. And the main one that I'm interested in right now is this one, the RTL_EEPROM. What this tool will do is when you run it, it will first, on these first lines, it'll tell you how many different RTL SDR devices it sees plugged into your system. Right now I've only got one. And if you have your udev rules set up right, like we did right before this, it will actually be able to pull this type of information from the device. So you can see manufacturer, USB vendor and product IDs, a serial number. That serial number is just an arbitrary number that I set. It really helps to set those to something to help differentiate them between, or for yourself. So if you've got a mix of them like I did, where I had some cheapos and then I thought I had two legitimate RTLSDR.com ones. I believe one of those now was a cheap clone, just based off the pictures that I've seen on the RTLSDR.com site about how to see if you have a legit one or not. It did not pass the test. I had since bought 2 new ones from them within the past couple weeks. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I did go ahead and purchase an AirSpy so that I could get that larger spectrum. But the way you would actually, set these serial numbers is with this same tool. So the RTL_EP ROM, specifically on this one, if it says, the serial numbers, it's just a bunch of zeros and then the number 5. So if I do -D and then 0, because that's the first one it found was 0, and so I can see that it was serial number 5. If I do a -S, and I'm going to make it number 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It doesn't have to be that long. I just like to have a bunch of zeros for whatever reason. So that's telling it to set device 0 serial number to be this. So I hit enter. It's going to ask me to confirm it here. It's saying, hey, you're going to be changing that from serial number 5 to serial number 1. Do you really want to do that? Yes, I do. And so it changes it. One thing I have noticed, though, is if I come back here and, explicitly tell it, show me the information for device 0. So if you had, say you had 4 plugged in, you'd have device 0, 1, 2, and 3. And so you'd go through and run that command to change the... Of course, it lost it, but to change the serial number, and you just change that -D0 to 1, 2, or 3, or however many that you're changing, and then, increment the serial number respectively so that you can tell them apart. The fun thing is right now, if I run this and ask to show the information for device 0, this will tell me that it is serial number 1, but without actually unplugging it and replugging it, other things on the system may not see that. It may still see the old one, and the best way I can demonstrate that is by installing the spectrum tuning software called GQRX. So I need to install that first. So sudo apt install GQRX. Let me see if that works. I may have to. Yeah, it's actually GQRX-SDR. It gave me a nice little hint there. So I install that and then run it, GQRX. And you can see it pops up this little configuration window. And if I do this little drop down here, I can come down and select this. Oh, look, oh, good. So it sees the correct serial number. I've done this before, and it may just be GQRX caching that information for whatever reason, but you can see the main thing it did is under device string, it put RTL equals 0. 0 is going to match that number you see when you run that RTL_EP ROM under the devices, that device index number 0. That's going to match what you see over here. So if you had 4 devices plugged in, the last one it sees would be 3. You'd have RTL equals 3. Of course, the other thing to pay attention to here is the input rate. So you can do, a few different rates on there. You're not going to get much better than 2.4 million on most of these RTL SDR devices. You can, if you have a decently fast machine and a legitimate RTL SDR.com device that has proper thermals and all that good stuff, so many caveats, you can probably bump that up to about 2.56 million and get away with it. You'll probably get some garbled transmissions on the edge of that spectrum, but that's pretty much the case with any of these devices when you're trying to tune to something that's near the edge of the sample zone. So right now we'll just leave it at 1.8 million. That's way more than overkill for us to test it. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So you can see that little pop up. You can also see that it popped up over here. If you click that little thing that came up, it will bring this into focus. Otherwise, you can click over here in the bar, or if you see it, you can just click on it. but it does like to pop under things if you have another window, full screen or anything. So just be aware of that. So first things first, let's change this to a local radio station. And we're going to change our mode over here to wideband FM stereo. And I'm going to play this for just a second and then stop it, so hopefully we don't get any kind of copyright strike on there. But I'm looking for, number one, to see that it actually tunes the spectrum. Number two, that it sees the radio station at 99.1. And that I can hear some audio, so that later on when I get things actually working, you can actually hear the scanner traffic that comes in. So here we go. Yep, works perfect. All right, so that tells us that our RTL SDR device is working properly. We've got our udev rules in there. Everything is ready for us to start configuring trunk recorder. So I just hit enter a couple of times there to get back to the bottom. So if I come back to trunk recorder, you can see all this. The next steps is configuring trunk recorder. So if we open that in a new tab, there is a lot of good information on this page on basically doing very similar to what I just did, launching GQRX, using that to help figure out what your tuning error is. Tuning error in this software package, the trunk recorder stuff is measured in, typically hertz. It's a much better method than trying to do the old parts per million stuff. So I recommend definitely reading through this and going through and figuring out what your error is. You notice it still does kind of talk about ppm, that kind of thing, but I'll leave that to you to figure that out for your individual devices. Gain, sort of the same thing, trying to figure out what your best gain is. And then once you have all that information, you can use that to create the configuration file for trunk recorder. The configuration file is in JSON format, which can be a little bit daunting if you've never worked with JSON before. It's very, very picky about indentations and spacing and things like that. There are tools online that you can pull up and, paste your configuration file into and make sure that it is valid JSON, so that you're not pulling your hair out trying to figure out what's going on with your configuration file. That said, when we talked earlier about how trunk recorder actually does its magic compared to, DSD Plus and the other packages out there, is that you give it a frequency to sit on, which they call it the center frequency. And so you give it that center frequency, and then however big your sample rate is, so, realistically, if you're trying to stretch it to its limits, 2.4 million samples or 2.56 million samples, take that, divide it by 2, and then whatever you set your center frequency to, minus whatever that was. So if you take, 2.4 million as an example, it would be, you take your center frequency, you subtract 1.2 megahertz off that, that's your lower bound. You add 1.2 megahertz to your center frequency, that's your upper bound. And so that's the chunk of spectrum that your RTL SDR device will be looking at. So that would be your full, 2.4 million or 2.4 megahertz of bandwidth that you'll be tuning into. And it talks about how to find your ideal frequency and all that. And you can see that you may need to cover slightly beyond a certain frequency. It gets into all that. Also note that, just inherently to some of these RTL SDR devices, you probably don't want it to tune exactly on, say, your control channel. You want to tune it around it, because the center tuning can sometimes not give you as good of a signal as as a frequency that's, a little higher or lower than the actual center frequency. The same is true as you get toward the edges of that chunk of spectrum that you're watching. Things at the edge of, the 1.2 megahertz, higher or lower than the center frequency can tend to give you garbled transmissions and stuff, just because when you're trying to latch on to signals at those far reaches of the sample, that they're just not as good. So just keep that in mind as you're trying to figure out what's going on. It also does talk about how to set up the multiple sources. It talks about how to specify the serial number and all that good stuff. They do have examples of that. If you look through the GitHub repo, there's more examples. Here's a very, very, very basic config for trunk recorder. We're going to take that note and pop back over here, and I'll show you. This is one that I filled out with the information from my local system. So let's talk about this Excel spreadsheet that I created. So these were all the frequencies that were being reported in that simulcast site for that TX Warn site that I wanted to monitor. So I basically just listed them in numerical order, starting at the smallest, going up, and then just to make my copy and paste easier, basically took this number, converted it into hertz, so just, times whatever, times a million, if that is what it is, yeah. And that gives me the frequency in hertz, and then basically started going through and seeing how best to divide this up between the different RTL SDR devices I had. So I had 4 decent ones on hand, so I wanted to split this up into chunks of spectrum that I could cover with the RTL SDR devices that I had. So staying within, that 2.5 megahertz-ish bandwidth that I could use. So you can see as I moved from one frequency down, you can see the spread there. For this one, between the top and bottom one, it was about 1.3 megahertz, give or take. Same here. This one's a pretty big jump because you're looking at a little bit more than 2 megahertz jump. And again, remember the maximum that you can get on one of these is anywhere from 2.4 megahertz to 2.5 megahertz, give or take. This one, a lot smaller there, so only about 600 kilohertz. This one, another big jump because you're going from 853 to almost 855, so it's almost a 2 megahertz jump there. So you can see that 1.9-ish megahertz. So that helped me pick which frequencies I wanted to cover. In order to figure out what my center frequency needed to be, you just do a little bit of math here, and you say, take the largest, add to the smallest, and then divide by 2. And that will give you your center frequency that you need to use. Now, because right now in my example, I'm only going to be using one of these, I need to make sure that I choose one that has the control channel in it. And so in this case, it should be this second one here. This guy should cover the spectrum needed to watch the control channel. So that's what I chose to put in here. So if we go down the list here of this config JSON file, the first line is it's going to be version 2. That's expected. It needs to be there for this version of trunk recorder, so that's what's there. And then we get into the sources section. This is where if you have more than one, you'd have multiple you'd have multiple sources in here. So here's what my configuration actually looked like when I had all 4 RTL SDR devices in there. You can see I had 4 different ones, and you can see here where I was telling it, you know, this one with serial number 3 is going to watch that chunk of spectrum, this one with serial number 4, and so on. But again, let's keep it simple right now, and we're only going to be using one. So first off, so we've got our frequency there. We've got our sample rate. So this is where I talked about, you know, the maximum you can pull through one of these is about 2.5 megahertz, give or take. So 2.56 megahertz here. Error, that's, I don't know if that's actually correct for this particular dongle, but I'm going to leave it anyway. It's usually pretty close. The error, that's where you follow that configuration guide up here and find the error in GQRX and all that. So that's where you get that error from. The gain, I've had good luck with a gain of 39 on my particular RTL SDR devices. You may have to play with that. Digital recorders is important. The digital recorders, that means how many different conversations that happen within this chunk of spectrum that this particular RTL SDR device will be watching. How many different conversations at once it can record. The higher that number, the more CPU you're going to use when you run this. So if you've got a pretty beefy computer, you don't have to worry too much about what that number is. I'm pretty sure on my AirSpy, because it's, you know, it's covering 10 megahertz of spectrum, I think I have that at 20. So again, don't have it make more recorders than you think you'll need, but that just may be a number that you have to play with to make sure that you've got enough to record all the talk groups that potentially could be running within that bit of spectrum. Driver, we're using the Osmo SDR driver, which I talked about earlier. It installs that prepackaged one that does not come with the AirSpy support. If you want AirSpy support, you need to build it yourself. So just one more note there on that. For device, we can see the RTL equals and then the serial number. We changed that serial number earlier though to 1, so I'm going to go ahead and make that change here. And so that's it right now for the single source. Again, you could do more depending on how many devices you have. So now for systems. So this is your actual system that you want to monitor. Things can get very complicated in the system stuff. They have examples. I don't know if it's on this page or not, where you can actually put in multiple sites from the same system. So if you were able to get multiple simulcast sites at once to reach your location, you can come in and there's a way to configure this so that it knows that it's the same system on multiple sites. But I'm not going to get into that in this video. So we give it the control channel. I know that's the control channel it's on, and it typically always is on that one, so I only have that one in there. I'll tell it it's a P25 type. Brings us to our next point of talk groups. How does it gonna know what the talk groups are? Well, this is where if you have a subscription to radio reference, you can kind of cheat this a little bit. So right here, I'm on the TX Warn site page, or system page, I should say. If I click menu here and go to downloads, I can download a CSV of all the talk groups. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have it save it. I'll show it in folder real quick. I'm going to tell it to open with Notepad++. Okay, so you can see it's just a normal CSV file. It's a direct export from that chart that's down below all the sites, all these talk groups. It's a direct export of that. What I can do though is I can select all of it, copy it, come back into my VM here. I can see already that I'm in the trunk build folder, which is not where I want to be. So I'm going to change directories up one so that I'm now in my main home folder. And then I'm going to change into my trunk recorder folder. And I'm just using tab to autocomplete the stuff. So that's, if you hear that little beep, that's when I hit tab that it's actually completing that. So change into that directory. There's all the stuff that we downloaded when we did the Git checkout and all that good stuff. So I'm going to create that file that I referenced in here called txwarn.csv. So I'm going to do nano txwarn.csv, hit enter. You can see it just created it, so it says it's a new file. I'm going to right click and paste. I can only see part of it, but if I go up, it does indeed have everything in there. So I've got my data in there. I'm going to hit Control X to exit. I'm going to tell it yes to save it, and then write it out as txwarn.csv, just as I had it typed out here. So for short name, that's where you're going to put your system name. You can change that to whatever system you are monitoring. I just have it as txwarn. Put the modulation type because it is P25, phase 1 and phase 2. Audio archive is something you're going to want to look at. Right now, I have it set to false, and what that means is it will record the conversations that are happening on the talk groups, but it will, with it set to false, it will delete those after it has sent them somewhere or uploaded them somewhere. In this case, where the end goal here is to push that audio to the Rdio scanner, which we have not talked about yet in full detail. And so by setting that to false, it says, hey, once you've successfully sent that over, delete the file off of the machine so that it does not fill up your machine. Because if you leave this running for a while, it makes a ton of files. A lot of times they are the raw WAV files, and they do add up quick, even if they're not very big by themselves. Call log will leave set to true. Capture directory, you'll probably have to edit this to match your machine, so I'm just telling it to go into that trunk recorder folder that I'm currently working out of right now. So if I do, the print working directory, I just take that and plug that in here. For right now, I do not need that plugin section, so I'm going to actually take that out for right now. So I need to take out all of that. And one thing I need to watch out for is, now that this is the actual last line in this, I need to take that comma out, or it's going to bark at me if I try to use this. So if you're not familiar with Notepad++, very handy program. I can come up here and tell it that I'm working on a JSON file, and it will actually format that all pretty. That's why this one looked not as nice as this one. I had already done that on this one. That's why it shows all that highlighting, but that's how you get that highlighting if you'd like it in Notepad++. So that being said, I'm going to take this and copy it, and I'm going to create that config JSON that the instructions talked about. So, creating the config.json file. And to do that, we're going to do the same thing we've been doing when we need to create files. Do nano, and we'll just call it config.json, if I can spell it right. Config.json. Again, new file. Paste that information in. All of that looks good. I'm checking for extraneous commas because that likes to bite me. Sometimes I don't see any right now. So that's a very, very basic config. And so what I can actually do now is we've already gone through the rigmarole of compiling trunk recorder and getting it installed and all that. So if I just type trunk recorder and hit enter, it will try to run. It will not run though because it will run because it's all config.json. If you name it config.json, it sees it and it runs. So that's perfect. I actually have on my other machine, I have a couple of different config files that I use, so they have different names in them. But it's nice that if it sees the default config.json, then you're good to go. You can just hit in it and hit enter, and so you can see where it started up, and shows you all the configuration that you had in that configuration JSON file. Loads the talk groups. It knows that it's seeing a radioreference.com header. Loads all those up, yada, yada, yada. It's using the Osmo SDR driver. We have our center tune frequency, all that good stuff. And the more important part is that it then tunes. And so I can see that right here that it tuned properly and says that it's decoding system ID 1A7, which is the system I want it to be recording, and it's doing 1A0, which, if you're familiar enough with the TX Warn system, there's actually 3 different I forget what that stands for, the RFSS stuff, but the Site 1 is like the big ones where all the county-wide systems and surrounding counties and stuff like get pushed to. They have number 2 here, which is kind of like the surrounding areas of Houston. That stuff gets shoved on to these Site layer 2 places, and then there's a layer 3 one, which is public safety. I see things like, some of the school district police departments get shoved onto this one. HPD operates off of these. So you get different groups talking on the different RFSS numbers there. So you may actually have to cover 2 different sites to pull in everything. I'll tell you, on my main setup, I have it monitoring both this the Harris County Northwest simulcast, and I have it monitoring the Houston Public Safety Springs site as well, so that I get all those calls. So we saw it tuned to that. One thing you'll start seeing in here is a bunch of errors, and those errors are because it's monitoring that control channel. It's seeing that a talk group has been granted a channel to talk on, but because I'm only running one SDR device with a limited bandwidth, I don't have anything that's watching that bit of spectrum that those channels and calls are actually occurring on. So it's going to give me an error saying, hey, I'm not recording that because I don't have a source that covers that frequency. The other thing you'll notice here is this stuff in red, the calls that it does see, it will give you statistics on those. I'll tell you right now that there's probably going to be more errors than normal because I have a little rubber ducky antenna on this SDR device, and it's sitting in the middle of the room, laying flat down, so it is not optimal receiving conditions right now for this example. But this shows, that this is working and that it's seeing calls come through. I can see the talk groups coming in. I haven't seen any encrypted calls come in, but it will see encrypted calls and it will ignore them because it cannot decode them. So you'll just see a note in here that says, hey, I saw an encrypted talk group come up, but I'm not recording. So that's good that's working. That's all well and good that you can see this, but we want to hear these calls. And that's where Rdio Scanner comes in. You can run Rdio Scanner on all kinds of devices. So you can see you can run it on Linux, you can run it on Mac, but you can run it on Windows. And so that's what we're going to do. Since I'm sure most people, that's what they're probably more familiar with. You can also see here the different pieces of software that it can kind of interface with. And I use the term interface lightly because it has true integration with, these two, where it uses an API to see what's going on. It also has this directory watch functionality where you can have it watch for recording files from either DSD Plus or ProScan. I have tinkered a little bit with the ProScan directory watch stuff. I'm not going to cover that in this video. It's a little cumbersome, and I haven't got it dialed in the way I really would like it to be. Maybe one day I'll make a video on that. But you can see that it takes the API from Trunk Recorder. So what we're going to do then is we can see nice big bold text, always download the latest version. So we're going to go to the Releases tab to download that. So we make sure we're on the right repo, which we are. I can see latest version. Latest version is from November right now. I believe the developer is actively working on the next version, which would be V7, which is why it's been a little while since there's been any updates. But I can tell you this program is solid as it is right now. I can't wait to see what he adds in the future. So we're going to click Windows. We're going to download it. I'm going to put this on the desktop just so that it's easy to find later. So I'm going to open this up, this zip file, and then I'm going to extract it out. And I'm going to extract this out to the C drive, make a new folder. I don't know, just call it radio. Sure, why not? And extract it into there, just so it's easy to find later. And now what I'm going to do is, I'm on Windows 11. You can do a similar thing in Windows 10. The menu, if you open the menu up here, you can tell it to open a command prompt and stuff from where you are. I'm going to right click and hit Open Terminal. It's going to open PowerShell. That's another thing in Windows 11 you can change. You can change which CLI utility you want to open with. Right now I left it default to PowerShell, but I can switch over to the good old command line by just running CMD there. And there's our familiar prompt, no PowerShell or anything like that. So if I list the directory, I can see the files that I unzipped earlier. So I'm just going to tell it to run the Rdio Scanner.exe. And we'll just give this a second. It's going to go through its first time run here and ask like, oh, can I connect on things? Like, sure. And then once you see this line where it talks about opening the web interface, you can see it's running on port 3000. And so right now it's showing my computer name, but we do not have to use that. We can use the good old loopback address 127.00.1 and open it up on port 3000. And we can see Rdio Scanner is running here. Like, great, it's running. If I hit the live feed button, that light turns green, it beeps just like a scanner would, but it's not currently ingesting anything, so we're not going to hear anything or see anything. So if we look over here, there's no talk groups, there's no nothing. So what we need to do then is we need to configure this guy. And to do that, there is an admin interface that we need to log into, and it's run on the same port, and you probably saw it in here where it says admin interface is at that/admin. So if I just tack in /admin and hit enter, it'll ask me to log in. It has a default password, which is given on is it on this page, or it may be further? So if I come up here and go to Docs, and then Platforms, and then Windows, It looks almost the same, but then it actually has some more stuff on the quick start here. And so it walks through, you know, unzipping the stuff, yada, yada, yada. And then getting logged in, it shows you what the default password is right here. So it's just Rdio-Scanner. So if I switch back over here, paste that in, and log in, I've got access to it. You can see right now it's complaining because we are using the default password, so we can change that real quick by going to Tools, Admin Password, paste that same default password in, and then we set our own password. Hit save, and it's happy again. Don't want to save it in Chrome. All right, so that gets us logged in, and that gets us the password changed. What we need to do now is a few house cleaning items. So the first thing I want to do is I have that CSV that I downloaded earlier. So first thing I want to do is I want to import that CSV. This typically works, so I'm going to try it. Because I still have it in my downloads bar down here, I'm just going to drag it up to this read CSV file. It did not work, so don't do that. So I click that button. I'm in my downloads folder. I choose that. I tell it that it is a radio reference style. And you can see there are a ton of talk groups on this system. And realistically, I probably won't see the majority of these on the site that I'm listening to because, you know, it has things on here like Brian, College Station stuff and all that. And I should probably tune this down. You can see here that it's kind of complaining that I'm trying to import too much. So it says to expect it to be slow. I don't honestly think I've noticed it be slow, so I'm just going to ignore that and tell it to import it anyway. So that's going to do its thing. So it imported those talk groups. Next thing we need to do is we need to define a system. So you can see right here that it has created this new system here automatically, but nothing is filled out. So first thing, we need to give it an ID. This is a trivial ID, so I'll just start with 1. We'll give it a label. Again, anything you want to call it. I'm just going to call it TX1 to keep things consistent. Very important, I'm going to make sure this auto-populate option is checked, because what that will do is it will add in any unknown talk groups automatically that maybe Radio Reference doesn't know about yet. So this will allow it to go ahead and automatically pop those in there. You can add a blacklist of IDs if there are certain talk groups that you don't want to hear. And if I click this unfortunate talk groups button, you can see it struggled. It did struggle there a little bit, but it did it in the end. It loaded them up. I'm not going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of that because that's just ridiculous. I can see it acting a little sluggish now. It wasn't acting so bad earlier when I ran through this as a test, but whatever. It's trying to recollapse it. I'll just scroll to the bottom and I'm going to hit save, basically. That's all I'm going to do. So we saved it. Gonna recollapse that back in. So that is saved. Now, there's a couple more options that we can talk about. So number 1 is access. If you're going to make this publicly accessible, you can set up access so that everyone can access it without a password, or you can set passwords that that get limited to certain systems or talk groups. So you can really dial this thing down if you want to. I do know of people who have gone through all of this, set it up, and they charge people to access it. They invested the money in getting all the equipment to get this set up. They host it. They make it available for anybody who doesn't want to go through that process. So that's how they do it with that access. The API key is the main other thing that we are interested in here. And I'm going to go ahead and drop that down and hit new API key. It's going to generate that API key, and it's going to ask for an identifier. I'm going to call this trunk recorder, just so that I know that that's what it's being used for. I'm going to copy it. I believe it's already saved. I don't know where these other systems came from, so I'm just going to delete. Sorry, I saw that red bang and it was acting funky. So, all right, so we've got our API key, and just so I don't lose it, I'm just going to paste it into there for right now. It thinks I hit groups. I did not. Okay. So that's all configured now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to my config.json file here, and I'm going to add in this new section that I took out earlier. I'm going to add it back in. So on the trunk recorder page, under configure, which actually I think I have it open right here. So if I do a search for RDO on here, yeah, I can see, here's an example. I just took that example and made it work for me. So change things as you need. You can tell that I'm using the Rdio Scanner uploader. This is the library to use. Library is kind of synonymous for, DLL in Windows terms. At least in this instance, the .so stuff. The server, I'm going to point it at the IP of this machine, which, let me just verify that it has not changed. Yeah, 10.1.0.32. So I changed that to my actual IP. I keep that 3000 port on there. So the short name, I'm telling it that I want to send this system to this plugin, this instance. And then right here where it asks for the API key, I paste in that API key that I copied out of Rdio Scanner earlier. And then I give it the system ID, which is that ID that I set over here under systems. The ID here is 1. So I just make sure that that matches over here. So I'm going to copy all of this, and we're going to come back over here to trunk recorder. It's probably still, nope. Okay, so it stopped. Good. All right, so I'm going to edit that config.json file, and I'm going to get rid of all that stuff and paste in my full new one. So it's the exact same as before. The only difference is that I added back in that plugins block with the stuff I created. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm just going to run trunk recorder again, and it's automatically going to pick up on that config.json file. It's going to go in there. If I scroll back up, you'll probably see where it saw that I had configured Rdio Scanner and that it made the connection, all that stuff. But let's hop back over to here. I'm going to navigate away from the admin interface and just go back to the base one here. And so first things first, if I hit live feed now, it'll turn on and go green. And we may have to give it a minute for us to actually hear some traffic come across, since, again, I'm running it on a single one. Yep, there it goes. So I can see Harris County Sheriff's Office, Tactical 2 channel. As it sees real talk groups come through, if I hit this select talk group button, wow, it really should have only populated that earlier. I think I know what the problem is there. The reason it's acting so wonky, if I come back into this, those top groups were imported, but if I actually kill this system and recreate it, so if I come in here and if I delete system and do new system and basically set it back up again, so system 1, TX1, auto-populate, save. If I browse this, the top groups in here, there is none. I had loaded, those top groups down here. So it made the system sluggish when I did that, but they are in there still. So if I come back to here and hit live feed again, if I hit select top group now, the only thing it has seen so far is a Harris County Constable Precinct 1 thing. It didn't actually play it, probably because it got put onto a channel that it can't record. But as it does see transmissions that it can monitor with my one RTL SDR device, it will work. What I can do, though, to show you, how crazy this thing is I can actually switch over to my main one that I run and turn on the live feed. And immediately, we're going to start seeing all kinds of calls come in. So I'm going to hit the pause button for a minute just so that I can illustrate a few more things and I'm not talking over what we're hearing. So first off, when you hit pause, you can see it tries to, Rdio Scanner tries to mimic a scanner that you would use normally. You can browse to this website from your local network from any device. You can also download an Android or iPhone app. It's called, Rdio Scanner. And you can download that from the App Store, and then you point it at this URL, and you can listen to it on your phone. If you are familiar with doing, port forwarding and all that on your router, you can make this publicly accessible. And you can put in, your public IP, or if you use like a dynamic DNS system or something like that, you can plug that into the app and you can use it on the go wherever you are. But one thing one of the other reasons I wanted to click pause is I wanted to show you that when you click pause, it's different than turning off the live feed. If you click the live feed button and make that go red again, it just stops trying to play all the traffic that was happening, and the only way to go back and hear that traffic is to do the search call function, which I'll show you in a minute. If you hit pause, however, you'll start to see this number go up, this Q. And so in the time that I hit pause, in between the time I hit pause and now, there's been 32 transmissions that came through. And that number is just going to keep going up, because if I hit select top group, you can see every single top group that it has seen is turned on here right now. So it's really hard to to stay caught up on things when you have all of this turned on. So it's much better to come in and, turn on only the stuff that you're interested in hearing. So, like for my area, I would be more interested in I like hearing the sheriff's office TAC channels. I typically like listening to the Lone Star College Police Department, HCSO dispatch, all the Tomball stuff. I'm fairly close to Tomball. Where's my other guy? Life Flights, interesting to listen to. There's more Lone Star College. That's their TAC channel. I am very close to ESD 11, so I like having those on. I typically don't turn on the DPS ones to listen to. You can hear a lot of interesting stuff on these Gulf Coast interoperability channels. I'm not going to get into what's on there. You can listen for yourself if you'd like to. Let's see. I think I'm just being... There they are. I knew I was being blind. The Harris County Constables Precinct 4 channels, and the way they operate, you know, if there's something important going on, they'll hold their main channel, their main dispatch channel for emergency traffic. So sometimes things spill over onto their secondary channel. I like having all of the mutual aid channels on, because that's typically where you get Life Flight talking to first responders that are on the ground. These TX warned 1, 3, blah, 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 blah. Again, interesting things go on those channels, but I'll leave that to you to listen to those. Yeah, a bunch of these mutual aid channels. And you can see in here that on my main system, there's some things in here that that show these talk group numbers that are not on radio reference yet. So that's something that you can come back to and listen to. So if I come back over here, and you can see that now that I filtered a bunch of those out, that queue number is a heck of a lot lower. If I click pause again, it'll start playing right where, I'd say right where I was, but that may not be true because I turned all of those off at one time. That probably killed the queue then, but as I turned those on, this is how many messages have come in from those different things. So if I unclick pause...
Okay, here. You can show me back in line.
That's what you're asking.
Yeah, and so I'll just pause it again. But so this acts just like a scanner does, and it's accessible anywhere on your home network. And if you port forward, you can get to it from anywhere. Very, very handy stuff. I can come back in here to search call, and I can see the last recordings that it's made. All of that gets uploaded into Rdio Scanner, which this is the log file of things. I'm not sure what that unique system ID, probably because I had that old system 1 in there, and this is the local one. This is my main one. I have to keep those separate in my head too. But so you can come in here. You can filter this stuff down, and so like groups, I can filter it down to Harris County schools. I can see Klein ISDs on there. I can filter it down further if I wanted to see Spring ISD stuff. The play button is not showing for some reason, which is probably just a visual bug. Yeah, so there's sometimes you'll run into things like that. Just go back down, filter back to what I had, so you can play these, and typically if things are working right, it will play them in order. So if I play this one, it'll play all of those in order up until it reaches the last one in its list. Normal scanning rules apply. You can hold on a system, which really won't do you much good in this case because we only have one system that I'm listening to, but you can hold on a particular talk group. If
check out those boards and see if they have possible in progress.
If something was happening on Precinct 4 and I didn't want to hear any of the other ones going on, I can hold on it. I can avoid it just like a normal scanner. And I'll show you a preview of some other really interesting things you can do. Is if you have a good computer system and a good graphics card and things like that. I've been talking to the guy that runs this site, the Crime Is Down website, and what he has is this scanner transcript section. And you can create your own one of these with a lot of work, and basically tie this interface back to your own personal transcribed stuff. So I actually have an artificial intelligent transcriber running that watches all of these calls that come in, transcribes them into text. I have it set for specific keywords to look for, and if it sees them, then it'll send a little notification to me so that if it's something interesting that I want to take a look at, I can. And I can come back in and see this stuff, and you can kind of see, I think I closed the disclaimer at the top that basically said, yes, this is a artificial intelligence generated text transcript and all that stuff. But the possibilities with the software that we have available to us these days it's crazy, all the different things you can do. But in particular, this stuff really impressed me, like getting Trunk Recorder running and getting Rdio Scanner running. One other thing I want to highlight on the Trunk Recorder side is if we're looking at their main page here, they do have a Discord server that you can join if you run into any problems trying to get this stuff running. They've got a Discord full of people. There's tons of people on there, including me, to help you get your configuration right or do anything else. But anyway, I think that should about do it for this video now. I'll unpause this for a second and let that finish out the video. But if you have any questions or anything, leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that usual YouTube stuff. Thanks for watching.
Like, Hill Valley and 60. Edward 65 was flagged down about it. I'll be heading that way.
Okay.
130, yes, sir.
136, can you make Edward 68 primary, please?
130, you're clear. 136, you're also clear. 251, there's no call trying to be at this time.
Go after. You brought me a slipper disturbing. Going service.